Christian challenge. I have a Christian challenge for you. I dare any Christian to truly answer these questions without bullshit. So if you go and read Acts 7, many of you probably have read Acts 7, but you didn't pay attention to what you was reading. You weren't able to refer it back to the actual story. But I want you to compare the two. You'll find the two that you'll be comparing is in Genesis and in Exodus. So as Stephen in this sermon is retelling the Exodus story, he makes some inaccuracies. He states some inaccuracies. Let's challenge. Well, the first challenge that I want you to go and do is look at the fact that in the story, according to Stephen in Acts 7, he says that Abraham, that means Jacob, was buried in the same place as Abraham in Shechem, land that was purchased by Abraham in Shechem. Now, did Abraham purchase some land in Shechem? Yes. But did he lose that land? Yes, he lost that land. But where does it say Abraham was buried? Abraham, Sarah, Jacob, and one of his other wife, Rachel, were not buried in Shechem. They were buried in Machpelah. Machpelah is where Abraham is supposedly buried, the land he had bought from a Hittite. But Stephen says he was buried in Shechem. They ain't living in the same place. They ain't buried in the same place. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. When he's retelling this story, Stephen says that when Jacob brought his brothers, the Israelites, into Egypt, where they was going through their drought, going through this famine, Stephen says that there were 75. 75. But when you go and you read Genesis, they said it was 70. Where do these extra 5 people come from? The math ain't mathing. The math is not mathing. Now, according to Stephen, when he was telling this story, he said that the Israelites were in Egypt for 400 years. But when you go back and you read the story in Genesis through Exodus, you come to the realization that nope, that's not the time frame. They were actually in Egypt for 437 years. Stephen's math ain't mathing. Maybe this is why the Sanhedrin was having their gnashing of teeth and they stoned the shit out of Stephen because he ain't telling the story right. He's just not telling it right. He's not telling it as Genesis and Exodus portrays this story. Now, I know you Christians are going to come up with some BS, so let me go ahead and get rid of a little bit of your BS. You're going to say that the fact that Abraham formerly owned Shechem, and then it was lost, and then it was repurchased again by, I think, Joshua might have repurchased it, that validates it. But nope. He says that Jacob was buried in Shechem. But Joseph is saying that he was buried. Joseph said that he is to be buried in Machpelah, which is what the Exodus story says. So y'all math is just not mathing. You're not making it make sense, Stephen. Stephen was supposed to be, I believe, a deacon or a replacement for an apostle. He was one of the two. He did a pretty shabby job. And then got so angry that he started calling the other Israelites names. You stiff neck. I guess maybe that's where the Hebrew Israelite get it, where if somebody doesn't agree with them, we're going to start calling you names. Because that's the only way we can get our point across is to try to talk bad about you and call you some names. But you know, Stephen's story it's not working. And I know some of you may say, well, those are minor inaccuracies. What does that have to do? If this is the inerrant word of your God, then it has to match. It has to make sense. It has to be accurate to the letter. If it's not accurate to the letter, then it is not the inerrant word of God, which means that your God is in error, that your book is in error, that it doesn't match up to history. So make it make sense, because your math ain't mathing. Remember always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey. Good vibration.